Check the deed again, I said calmly, watching my sister Amanda's smug expression falter slightly over our video call. What do you mean? She demanded, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her coffee mug. Mom and Dad sold me the beach house. It's done. I'm Sarah Parker, 34, and until yesterday, I thought my family's disputes couldn't get any worse. But then Amanda decided to flaunt her latest victory, acquiring our beloved $2 million beach house in Newport for just $1. Just wanted to share the good news, she chirped in her text, followed by a photo of herself posing in front of the weathered blue shutters that had been part of our summers for decades. Mom and Dad finally recognized who deserves this place. Hope you're not too disappointed. The house had been in our family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it with his own hands, spending weekends crafting a wraparound porch where we'd watch storms roll in over the Atlantic. Every board, every window, every room held memories, my first steps on those hardwood floors, Mom teaching me to bake in the sunlit kitchen, Dad showing me how to sail from our private dock. I took a slow sip of my own coffee, letting Amanda's gloating wash over me. She had no idea what was coming. You know what's funny? I said, keeping my voice light. I was just speaking with Mr. Davidson yesterday. The color drained from Amanda's face. Grandpa's lawyer? Why would you? Oh, you didn't know he was still handling the trust? I asked innocently. The one Grandpa set up before he passed. The one that specifically states the beach house can't be sold without both granddaughters' consent. Amanda's coffee mug clattered against her desk. You're lying. Mom and Dad said they had full ownership. They didn't. They were trustees, Amanda. But they never owned it outright. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my messages. Want me to forward you the trust documents, or should I wait for Mr. Davidson to call you directly? He seemed pretty interested in that $1 sale. You're just jealous, Amanda snapped, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad prefer me. That's why they gave me the house. Because I deserve it. I thought about the years of favoritism, the way our parents had always catered to Amanda's whims while dismissing my achievements. The prestigious law firm partnership I'd earned. Barely a congratulations. Amanda's latest failed business venture. They'd emptied their retirement account to fund it. This isn't about preference, Amanda. It's about the law. And tomorrow, you're going to learn exactly what that means. The truth was, I'd known this was coming. 6 months ago, when Mom started making odd comments about simplifying the family assets and making sure everything was properly distributed, I'd reached out to Mr. Davidson. He confirmed my suspicions. They were planning something with the beach house. Your grandfather was very clear, he told me during our lunch meeting. The property stays in the family, with both granddaughters having equal rights. He'd seen too many families torn apart by inheritance disputes. So I'd waited, documenting everything. Every suspicious email, every leading question about my attachment to the property, every casual suggestion that I was too busy with my career to properly enjoy the house. And now, watching Amanda's confident facade crumble, I knew the wait had been worth it. I've already started redecorating, Amanda said, desperation creeping into her voice. I've ordered new furniture, hired contractors. Better cancel those orders, I advised. Because as of tomorrow morning, that sale is going to be null and void. And Amanda, the trust has some interesting provisions about attempted fraud. I ended the call before she could respond, but my phone immediately lit up with messages from our parents. How could I do this to my sister? Why was I being so difficult? Didn't I want the family to be happy? I scrolled through them without responding, instead opening my email to find Mr. Davidson's latest update. The legal paperwork was ready. By tomorrow, my family would learn that their scheme had backfired spectacularly. Standing up from my desk, I walked to the window of my home office, looking out at the city skyline. Part of me felt sad that it had come to this, but a larger part felt relieved. Finally, after years of manipulation and favoritism, justice was about to be served. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Amanda that made me smile. Mom's crying. I hope you're happy. I thought about all the times I'd been made to feel guilty for standing up for myself, for not going along with their plans, for daring to have my own life outside the family drama. I am happy, I typed back. And by the way, I've already contacted the contractors you hired. They were very interested to learn about the property's legal status. Then I silenced my phone, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and settled in to wait. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Davidson's office just as the storm broke. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched lightning crack across the Boston skyline, eerily matching my family's impending meltdown. "Your sister's lawyer has been calling nonstop," Mr. Davidson said, gesturing for me to sit down. His bow tie was slightly crooked, a sure sign he'd been dealing with heated conversations. "And your parents are currently in my lobby, demanding to speak with you." I smoothed my skirt, settling into the leather chair. "Let them wait a few more minutes. The trust documents are ironclad," he continued, pulling out a thick folder. "Your grandfather anticipated something like this might happen. He saw how your parents favored Amanda even back then." A memory flashed through my mind. Grandpa watching from his porch rocker as our parents fawned over Amanda's mediocre report card while ignoring my academic awards. He pulled me aside later, his voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes, Sarah, the best revenge is patience." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker are becoming quite insistent," his secretary announced. "Send them in," I said before Mr. Davidson could respond. "It's time." My parents burst through the door, Amanda trailing behind them. Mom's face was blotchy from crying, Dad's tie askew. Amanda looked like she hadn't slept. "What is the meaning of this?" Dad demanded, waving a legal notice. "We had every right to sell that property." Mr. Davidson cleared his throat. "Actually, Mr. Parker, you didn't. As trustees, your role was to maintain the property for both beneficiaries. The trust explicitly prohibits selling or transferring ownership without both granddaughters' consent." "This is ridiculous," Mom snapped. "We're her parents. We know what's best." "What's best?" I finally spoke, my voice steady. "Like when you convinced me to skip my Oxford scholarship interview because Amanda needed support at her local college orientation. Or when you remortgaged the house to fund her fifth failed business venture." "That's not fair," Amanda protested. "My wellness center would have succeeded if..." "If what?" I cut her off. "If you'd actually shown up to run it instead of posting Instagram photos from Bali with the startup money." Mr. Davidson pulled out another document. "There's more. The trust has an anti-fraud provision. Any attempt to circumvent the dual ownership clause triggers immediate legal consequences." My father's face paled. "Consequences?" "The property immediately falls under direct court supervision," Mr. Davidson explained. "All trustees, meaning you and Mrs. Parker, are removed. And any party involved in the fraudulent transfer is barred from using the property for 5 years. 5 years? Amanda shrieked. "But I already told everyone I'm hosting my wedding there next month." "Should have checked the deed first," I said quietly. Mom turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this? We only wanted to secure Amanda's future. You have your career, your success. She needs this more than you do." "That's exactly the problem," I replied. "You've spent years ensuring Amanda's future at my expense, but Grandpa saw it coming. That's why he protected my inheritance." Mr. Davidson pulled out one final document, Grandpa's letter to be opened if the anti-fraud provision was ever triggered. Dad reached for it with trembling hands. "My dear family," he read aloud. "If you're reading this, then my fears have been realized. You've attempted to deny Sarah her rightful inheritance, likely believing you were acting in Amanda's best interests. But true love doesn't mean favoring one child over another. It means ensuring fairness and justice for all." Amanda sank into a chair, her bravado finally cracking. "I don't understand. The contractors are starting renovations tomorrow. I've already spent money." "Money you didn't have the right to spend," Mr. Davidson interjected. "The trust will require full reimbursement for any unauthorized changes." "This will ruin me," Amanda whispered. For the first time, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Amanda had always been the golden child, but she was also a victim of our parents' enabling. She'd never learned to stand on her own feet. "It doesn't have to ruin you," I said softly. "I'm willing to discuss a fair co-ownership arrangement, equal access, equal responsibilities, but things have to change." "Equal?" Mom scoffed. "After what you've done." "After what I've done." I stood up, my patience finally snapping. "I've spent my entire life watching you hand everything to Amanda while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. The beach house was the one thing Grandpa protected for me, and you tried to steal it." The room fell silent except for the storm still raging outside. Mr. Davidson quietly pushed a stack of papers across his desk. These documents will void the fraudulent sale and restore the original trust arrangements, he explained. However, Sarah has generously offered to waive the 5-year ban if certain conditions are met. What conditions? Dad asked worriedly. I took a deep breath. First, Amanda repays every cent she spent on unauthorized changes. Second, we establish a formal co-ownership agreement with strict guidelines for usage and expenses. And third, I paused, meeting each of their eyes. You all agree to family counseling. This pattern of favoritism ends now. Amanda looked up, surprise flickering across her face. You'd still share the house with me, after everything? You're my sister, I said simply. And that house holds memories for both of us. But we need to learn how to be a real family, not this twisted dynamic we've created. The storm outside was beginning to clear, sunlight breaking through the clouds. My parents exchanged glances, their anger giving way to something that looked almost like shame. Your grandfather would be proud, Mr. Davidson said quietly. He always said you had his strength. I watched as the papers were signed, each signature representing a small step toward healing. It wasn't the ending any of us had expected, but maybe it was the one we needed. As we left the office, Amanda caught my arm. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never realized. I know, I replied. But now we have a chance to do better. The beach house still stood waiting, its weathered shutters and wraparound porch holding decades of memories. But now, it held something else too. The promise of a fresh start if we were brave enough to take it. Walking to my car, I smiled, thinking of Grandpa's words. Sometimes, Sarah, the best revenge is patience. He was wrong about one thing though. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's the chance to build something better from the ashes of what was broken. The next few weeks brought changes none of us had expected. Our first family counseling session was as awkward as you'd imagine. 4 of us sitting in Dr. Martinez's sun-filled office, each struggling to meet the other's eyes. Let's talk about the beach house, Dr. Martinez suggested, her calm voice cutting through the tension. It seems to represent more than just property to this family. I watched Amanda fidget with her designer bracelet, a nervous habit from childhood. Mom stared out the window while Dad studied his shoes with unusual intensity. It was supposed to be mine, Amanda finally burst out. Everything was always supposed to be mine. That's what they always told me. And how do you feel about that now? Dr. Martinez asked. Amanda's eyes met mine, then quickly darted away. I feel stupid and ashamed. Sarah worked for everything she has, while I just expected things to be handed to me. The admission hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken truth. Meanwhile, the beach house sat empty, waiting for us to sort ourselves out. The contractors Amanda had hired were gone, their half-finished renovations halted. Mr. Davidson had helped us draft a formal co-ownership agreement, but we hadn't used the house since that day in his office. One Saturday morning, I decided it was time. I drove the familiar coastal road alone, watching seabirds wheel overhead. As I pulled up to the house, memories washed over me, summer barbecues, winter storm watching, Grandpa teaching me to tie sailing knots on the dock. The key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the door. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered, except for the stack of Amanda's renovation plans on the kitchen counter. I picked them up, curious despite myself. She'd wanted to modernize everything, turn our cozy beach cottage into something from a luxury magazine. Gone would be the weathered wood walls, the creaky screen door that announced every entrance, the window seats where we'd spent rainy days reading. My phone buzzed. Speak of the devil. I know you're there, Amanda said when I answered. I saw your car from the street. Were you following me? No, maybe. I've been driving by every weekend, trying to work up the courage to go in. She paused. Can I come up? I thought about saying no, about claiming this moment for myself. But that wouldn't solve anything. The doors open. Minutes later, I heard her familiar footsteps on the porch. The screen door creaked its welcome. I was looking at your renovation plans, I said as she entered the kitchen. She winced. They're horrible, aren't they? Too modern, too, everything. She ran a hand along the worn countertop. I was trying to erase all the old stuff, make it mine somehow. But that was wrong. Not everything needs to be Instagram-worthy, I said mildly. God, I was so obsessed with that, wasn't I? She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Perfect house, perfect life, perfect everything. Meanwhile, you were actually building something real. We stood in silence for a moment, the sound of waves filling the space between us. Remember when Grandpa taught us to make hot chocolate here? Amanda asked suddenly. The real kind with melted chocolate and cream. And you burned your tongue because you couldn't wait for it to cool, I said, smiling at the memory. You shared yours with me, she said quietly. Even then, you were looking out for me, and I never saw it. I turned to face her fully. We can't change the past, Amanda. But we can do better now. She nodded, tears gleaming in her eyes. I want to, I really do. That's why. She reached into her bag and pulled out a check. This is to repay the contractor deposits, and I've canceled all the renovation plans. I took the check, noting the amount with surprise. This must be everything you had saved. It's the right thing to do, she said firmly. Besides, the house doesn't need changing. It's perfect as it is. As if in agreement, a warm breeze swept through the open windows, carrying the salt-sweet scent of the ocean. We could make hot chocolate, I suggested. I think Grandpa's recipe is still in the drawer. Amanda's face lit up. Really? You'd want to do that? With me? Why not? We're supposed to be learning to share this place, right? As we moved around the kitchen, falling into an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm, I thought about how healing sometimes comes in small moments, in shared memories, in quiet admissions, in cups of hot chocolate made from ancient family recipes. Our parents were trying too, in their own way. Dad had started individual counseling, finally confronting his pattern of enabling behavior. Mom was struggling more, still prone to making excuses for Amanda, but at least she was aware of it now. I've been thinking, Amanda said as we settled on the porch with our steaming mugs. What if we kept some traditions but started some new ones too? Not changing everything, just adding to it. What did you have in mind? Well, the guest room upstairs, the one that's basically storage now. I was thinking we could clear it out, make it a proper bedroom. For when either of us wants to stay overnight. I considered this. The room had been gathering dust for years, filled with old furniture and forgotten beach toys. That's actually not a bad idea, I admitted. We could do it together. Amanda's face broke into a genuine smile, not her usual camera-ready grin, but something softer, more real. I like that, she said. And Sarah? Thank you. Not just for the hot chocolate, but for not giving up on me completely. Looking out at the ocean, I thought about Grandpa again. He'd known this day might come, had prepared for it legally. But maybe he'd also hoped for this, for his granddaughters to find their way back to being sisters. You know what else we could do? I suggested. Fix up the old sailboat. Remember how Grandpa used to take us out? You mean the death trap in the boathouse? The one that's probably full of spiders. That's the one. Amanda shuddered theatrically, then laughed. Okay, but you're checking for spiders. Some things never change. We spent the rest of the morning planning, remembering and slowly rebuilding not just the house's future, but ours too. It wasn't perfect. We still had years of patterns to unlearn, trust to rebuild. But sitting there with my sister, watching the waves and sharing hot chocolate, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. The beach house had always been more than just property. It was our anchor, our history, our future. And maybe, just maybe, it would be the place where our family finally learned to heal. 1 year later, I stood on the beach house porch watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. Behind me, laughter drifted through the open windows. Amanda attempting to teach Mom her famous guacamole recipe in the kitchen. Need some company? Dad appeared beside me, holding out a glass of wine. I accepted it with a smile. How's therapy going? Good, he said, settling into one of the rocking chairs. Dr. Martinez says I'm making progress. Though she did call me out last week for trying to pay Amanda's parking tickets. Old habits die hard. Something like that. He took a sip of his wine. You know, your grandfather once told me I was ruining both my daughters by playing favorites. I didn't listen. The past year had brought changes none of us had expected. After our initial confrontation in Mr. Davidson's office, we had all been forced to face some hard truths. The family counseling sessions had been tough, filled with tears and accusations, but also breakthroughs. Amanda had surprised us all. After repaying the contractor deposits, she had thrown herself into learning actual business skills. She was now running a successful social media consultancy, legitimately this time, without any parental bailouts. The guest room looks amazing, Dad commented, changing the subject. You and Amanda did a great job. We had, actually. Those first few weekends working together had been awkward, but somewhere between stripping wallpaper and arguing over paint colors, we had started rebuilding our relationship. The room was now a perfect blend of both our styles. My practical comfort meeting her eye for design. Inside, I heard Mom exclaim over a spilled bowl, followed by Amanda's laughter. No tears, no drama, just normal family chaos. Remember when you girls were little? Dad asked suddenly. You used to put on shows on this porch. Amanda would sing completely off-key, and you tried to correct her pitch. And she'd cry until you bought her ice cream, I added, but without bitterness. Those memories felt different now, viewed through the lens of growth and understanding. The sailboat bobbed gently at the dock, restored now, thanks to months of weekend work. Amanda had indeed made me check for spiders, but she had done her share of the sanding and painting. We had even taken it out a few times, though she still squealed at every wave. Your grandfather would be proud, Dad said quietly, not just of the house, but of how you handled everything. You found a way to fix things without breaking them completely. We all did, I corrected him, even if it took a legal crisis to get us here. The screen door creaked open and Amanda emerged, balancing a plate of chips and guacamole. Taste test time. And be honest, Mom already admitted she likes it better than her own recipe. Blasphemy, Dad teased, reaching for a chip. I watched my sister settle into the chair beside me, her feet tucked under her like when we were kids. She looked different now, less polished, maybe, but more genuine. The designer clothes were mostly gone, replaced by comfortable beachwear. She had even started wearing her natural hair color. I have news, she announced suddenly. I've been approved for a small business loan. A real one, from the bank, no family money involved. Amanda, that's fantastic. I smiled at her obvious pride. It feels good, she admitted. Scary, but good. Like I'm finally doing things the right way. Mom joined us, bringing more wine and her own quiet contentment. The family counseling had been hardest on her, forcing her to confront her role in enabling Amanda's dependency. But she was trying, learning to love both her daughters equally. As darkness settled over the beach, we lit the old tiki torches Grandpa had installed decades ago. Their warm glow reminded me of countless summer nights spent exactly like this, only now, the conversation was honest, the laughter genuine. Oh, Amanda sat up straight. I almost forgot. I found something when I was clearing out my old apartment. She disappeared inside, returning with a familiar-looking leather book. Grandpa's journal, I breathed, recognizing it immediately. I found it in Mom's attic, she explained. There's an entry from right before he set up the trust. I think you should read it. She handed me the journal, open to a page dated a few months before his death. Watched my granddaughters today, so different, yet both so special. Sarah with her quiet strength, Amanda with her bright spirit. I worry about what will happen when I'm gone, about the patterns I see forming in their parents' behavior. But I also have hope. Sarah has her mother's backbone. She'll fight when it matters. And Amanda, beneath all that flash, has a good heart. Someday they'll both understand what really matters. Until then, I'll make sure they have a place to come home to when they're ready to find their way back to being sisters. I looked up to find Amanda wiping tears from her eyes. He knew, she said softly. He knew we'd mess everything up, but he also knew we'd fix it eventually. He gave us the tools, I agreed. The trust, the house, the letter. He just waited for us to be ready to use them. The waves crashed steadily against the shore, a rhythm as familiar as my own heartbeat. This place had always been special, but now it felt even more so. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was the foundation we had rebuilt our family on. To Grandpa, Dad raised his glass. And to second chances. We all drank to that, sitting together on the porch where so many family stories had unfolded. The past year had taught us all something about forgiveness, about growth, about the difference between enabling and supporting. Amanda reached over and squeezed my hand. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me a chance to earn my place here. I squeezed back, remembering that day in Mr. Davidson's office when everything could have gone so differently. Thank you for proving me right about taking that chance. Above us, stars began appearing in the darkening sky, the same stars Grandpa used to teach us to navigate by. He had always said you couldn't find your way home without first knowing where you stood. We had finally found our standing place, not just in this house, but with each other, and for the first time in years, it felt like we were all truly home.